Let me say something that might sting a little. Being nice to a narcissist isn't helping you. It's fueling them. You think your kindness will soften them, earn their respect, or keep the peace, but what you're really doing is giving them power. Today, I'm not here to tell you to be mean. I'm here to show you something smarter. Because this isn't about being rude. It's about being effective. So stop over-explaining, stop people-pleasing. Let's talk about what to do instead. Let's start here. Because this is where everything begins. You've got to recognize the power dynamic. That's the root. And if you miss this, everything else you try, setting boundaries, communicating clearly, protecting your peace, it all falls apart because you're fighting a battle you don't even see. Now, when I say power dynamic, I'm not talking about someone physically overpowering you or making threats in obvious ways. No, I'm talking about the subtle daily shift of control. A narcissist doesn't walk around with a sign that says, "I'm here to manipulate you." They wear charm, they wear confidence, they wear need. And you, because you're empathetic, kind, giving, don't see the game being played until you're deep in it. But here's the truth. The narcissist isn't in a relationship with you. They're in a relationship with control. They want to be adored, obeyed, and rarely challenged. And your niceness, your constant peacemaking, your habit of softening your words so they won't get upset, that's not registering to them as kindness. It's registering as submission. Let that land. That's the power dynamic they want. They push and you bend. They accuse and you explain. They insult and you smooth things over. You're dancing to keep the peace, and they're watching you spin around thinking, I've got them exactly where I want them. This isn't about blaming you. This is about waking you up, because what looks like keeping things calm is actually reinforcing their position. The more you prioritize their comfort over your clarity, the more you hand over your power, one small act at a time. You don't even notice it until you look up and realize you don't recognize yourself anymore. And this is why being nice doesn't work. You're not dealing with someone who values mutual respect. You're dealing with someone who views relationships as a hierarchy, and in their mind, they're always supposed to be on top. So every time you go quiet to avoid a reaction, every time you apologize for something you didn't do, every time you say, it's okay, when it's absolutely not okay, you're unknowingly affirming that dynamic. But you have a choice. And it starts by seeing this clearly. Ask yourself, who's doing the most emotional labor in this relationship? Who's constantly adapting, adjusting, managing reactions? If the answer is you, then guess what? You're not in an equal partnership. You're in a performance, one where your role is to keep the narcissist comfortable no matter the cost to yourself. So what do? You start by pulling your power back, not with rage, not with retaliation, but with awareness. You stop over-explaining. You stop tiptoeing. You stop offering emotional discounts for someone who pays with ego. You take a breath and you say, I'm not doing this anymore. Not out loud at first, maybe not even to them, but to yourself. Because once you recognize the dynamic, everything starts to shift. You begin to see that this isn't about you being too sensitive or not understanding. It's about someone engineering a world where they always win and you always shrink. Here's what happens next, and I want to prepare you for it. The moment you stop playing your role, the narcissist will react. They'll poke harder. They'll guilt trip. They'll call you selfish. Why? Because you're not staying in the role they cast you in. But that resistance, that's confirmation that you're changing the game, and they feel it. That's why this step matters. Recognizing the power dynamic is not just about naming the problem. It's about reclaiming your position. You're not here to be controlled, appeased, or tolerated. You're here to live in clarity. And once you see the game, you don't play it the same. That's how you start pulling your power back quietly, steadily, intentionally. And you don't apologize for it. Now, once you recognize that power dynamic, once the lights come on and you start to see what's really going on, the next step is learning to communicate in a whole new way. And this is where a lot of people trip up because they think the opposite of nice is mean. It's not. The opposite of nice isn't rude. It's clear. See, we've been conditioned, especially if you grew up walking on eggshells, to believe that clarity is dangerous, that if you speak directly, you'll offend. That if you stop sugarcoating, you'll be seen as difficult or cold. But let me ask you this, how's that sugarcoating working for you? How many times have you softened your message only to have it completely ignored, twisted, or used against you? Narcissists love vague language. They love people who tiptoe, who qualify every sentence with, "I'm sorry," or "I don't mean to be rude," but because it tells them exactly where your confidence is and how easily they can bend you, the less certain you sound, the more control they gain. They don't just listen to your words, they read your hesitation. So what you have to do is replace that performance of niceness with the practice of clarity. It's not about tone, it's about being rooted. It's about making your words match your boundaries without leaving the back door open for negotiation. Let me give you a simple example. Instead of saying, "I mean, if you're not too busy, I was kind of hoping we could maybe talk later, but no worries if not," you say, "I'd like to talk this evening. Let me know what time works." Do you feel the difference? One is trying not to disturb. The other is simply stating a need. And when you're dealing with someone manipulative, you don't want to leave them space to redefine your message, because they will. They'll pretend not to understand. They'll act confused. They'll twist your intentions. And when you've been overly polite and unclear, it gives them room to do that. So you make it airtight, direct, calm, short. You don't overshare. You don't over-apologize. You don't explain yourself like you're on trial. When you're dealing with someone who doesn't respect your voice, less is more. Every extra sentence you add is another thread they can pull on. So tighten up. That means no more justifying your boundaries with your life story. No more padding your needs with disclaimers like, "I know this sounds crazy, but it's not crazy to have limits." It's not rude to say no. You're not doing something wrong by using your voice. You've just been taught that the only safe way to speak is by shrinking first. That ends now. When you start speaking with clarity, you may notice people pulling back. That's okay. Let them, because the people who only liked you when you were overly agreeable were never listening to you. They were managing you. They liked how you made them feel, not who you really were. When you stop performing, they may lose interest. And that's not a loss. That's a sign you're getting free. I want you to understand this deeply clear communication doesn't have to be loud. It doesn't have to be forceful. You don't match the narcissist's energy. You just have to stop diluting your truth. Speak from a grounded place. Say what you mean. Don't chase understanding from people who benefit from your confusion. And here's something powerful. Once you start practicing clarity, you start to hear your own voice again. You stop second guessing every word. You stop wondering if you're too much or not enough. You start trusting your message. And when your words become clear, your boundaries follow. Because what narcissists hate the most is someone who's unshakable, someone who doesn't flinch, someone who says no and doesn't feel the need to explain it 12 different ways. That kind of presence isn't mean. It's mature. It's not aggressive. It's aligned. You don't owe anyone a softened version of your truth just to make them feel bigger. You owe yourself the dignity of being clear. So now that you've recognized the power dynamic and started practicing real clarity, not just politeness, there's another shift you need to make, one that's not always intuitive, especially if you're used to being emotionally available, empathetic, and responsive to everyone's moods. But when it comes to dealing with a narcissist, there's a strategy that will protect your peace more than any perfect phrase ever could. It's called emotional detachment, or what some call the gray rock method. And it's exactly what it sounds like. A gray rock, dull, boring, unbothered, unmoved. You don't shimmer. You don't react. You don't dance when they poke you. You stop giving them the spark they crave. Because make no mistake, a narcissist isn't just looking for attention, they're looking for a reaction. That's their fuel. If they can get under your skin, they feel powerful. If they can make you angry, guilt you into a long explanation, or drag you into a circular argument, you've just fed their ego. They win not because they're right, but because you engaged, you showed them that they still have control over your emotions. And that's where most people get stuck. You think if you can just say it right, they'll finally hear you. Or if you explain how hurt you are, they'll finally understand. But here's the part no one wants to hear. They already know. They know they hurt you. They know they crossed the line. They know you're upset, and they're using that as confirmation that they're still in control. So how do you stop that pattern? You go gray. You remove the emotional charge. You stop giving them that satisfying reaction. And that doesn't mean you're cold or cruel. It means you're calm and unshaken. When they insult you, you don't defend yourself. When they try to provoke you, you don't take the bait, you don't argue, you don't engage, you stay steady, uninteresting, neutral. Now, this can feel unnatural at first, especially if you're someone who's used to being emotionally expressive or trying to fix conversations. But you have to remind yourself, you're not in a healthy dialogue here. You're not trying to build connection. You're trying to protect yourself from manipulation. Let's be clear, going gray isn't about being passive. It's about being strategic. You're not rolling over. You're stepping out. You're saying, I'm not available for this chaos anymore. It's choosing peace over performance. And you'll notice the more emotionally neutral you become, the more frustrated they'll get. They may escalate at first. Try harder to get a rise out of you. That's expected. You're changing the rhythm, and they don't like that. But stay consistent. The storm will pass, and when it does, they'll be left spinning in their own drama while you stay grounded. You're not there to soothe them anymore. You're not there to explain yourself for the 100th time. You're not there to offer emotional labor in exchange for crumbs of decency. You've outgrown that. And I want to say this clearly emotional detachment isn't disconnection from your values. You're not abandoning your integrity. You're using it. You're deciding that your energy is sacred, that not every comment deserves a comeback, that not every insult requires a response, that sometimes the strongest thing you can do is not react. Because when you stop reacting, you become unpredictable. You break the pattern. You stop feeding the narcissist cycle. And suddenly, the same tactics that used to work they can no longer push your buttons because you've taken them off the table. This doesn't mean you're numb. It means you've stopped making your emotions public property. You still feel everything. You're just not broadcasting it for someone who will use it as ammunition. That's the power of emotional neutrality. You don't have to raise your voice. You don't have to win the argument. You just have to stop playing their game. Let them throw their tantrum. Let them spiral. You stay still. You stay boring. You stay free. Silence isn't weakness. It's wisdom. So you've recognized the power dynamic. You've learned how to be clear, not just nice. You've practiced emotional detachment, even when every part of you wanted to defend yourself or explain. That brings us here to the next piece people struggle with the most, holding the boundary without guilt. Now listen, I get it. For a lot of people, especially the ones who've been trained to be the fixer, the peacekeeper, or the one who always keeps things together, boundaries feel harsh. They feel selfish. You've been taught that saying no means you're letting someone down, that you're not being understanding enough. But the truth is, boundaries are not a rejection of the other person. They're a declaration of your values. And if someone treats your boundary like a betrayal, they were never respecting you to begin with. Here's what happens when you set a boundary with a narcissist. They test it immediately. They'll guilt you. Wow, I guess you don't care anymore. They'll flip it. After everything I've done for you, this is how you treat me. Or they'll flat out ignore it. Pretend you never said anything. Show up late anyway. Call you in the middle of the night. Push just a little harder to see if you'll cave. And if you're not solid in yourself, that's the moment where guilt creeps in. You start second guessing. Maybe I was too rigid. Maybe I should have softened that message. Maybe it wasn't that big of a deal. That's not your intuition talking. That's the emotional residue of being conditioned to prioritize someone else's comfort over your own. But here's something I need you to hear. Holding a boundary is not about them liking it. It's about you living in alignment. You can't set a limit and still worry about how they'll react to it. That's not a boundary. That's a performance. That's trying to manage someone else's response instead of protecting your own reality. You don't need a permission slip to enforce your own limits. You don't need their approval. You don't need a green light. If something crosses your line, you get to call it out. And if someone repeatedly ignores that line, you get to step back, not to punish them, but to protect you. I see people say things like, well, I tried setting boundaries and they didn't respect them. Let me be clear, that's not on you. Boundaries are not about controlling someone else's behavior. They're about deciding what you will do when your line gets crossed. You can't make someone be respectful, but you can make it very clear that disrespect is the end of the conversation. So when someone pushes your limits and waits for you to flinch, don't. When they test your no to see if it really means no, don't waver. Say what you mean what you say, and follow through. It might feel unfamiliar at first, even painful. You might feel like you're being too much. That's just your nervous system adjusting to your new normal. You're used to bending. You're used to being liked. But being liked at the cost of your peace is not a win. It's a trap. And you know what? The people who truly care about you won't be offended by your boundaries. They'll respect them. They'll hear your no and not take it personally. But someone who sees your boundary as a threat is telling you exactly who they are and what role they expect you to keep playing. This is where your growth gets tested, not in the moment you set the boundary, but in the moments afterward, when it's inconvenient, when it's challenged, when it would be easier just to fold. That's when you get to choose, do I go back to what's familiar or do I stand in what's healthy? And here's what I'll tell you, it gets easier. The guilt fades. The confidence builds. The more you practice it, the more natural it feels. And soon, what used to feel like confrontation starts feeling like clarity. What used to feel like guilt starts feeling like relief. You are not responsible for someone else's reaction to your boundary. You're only responsible for honoring it. If you've made it this far, if you've recognized the power dynamic, stepped into clarity, practiced emotional detachment, and learned how to hold your boundaries without flinching, then there's one more thing you've got to do. And it's probably the most important one. You've got to redirect your energy towards self-respect, because here's the reality. When you've been dealing with a narcissist for weeks, months, sometimes years, your energy has been spent on them. Every reaction, every strategy, every moment you've questioned yourself, defended yourself, tried to fix the situation or win them over. It all takes something from you piece by piece. And the trap is that it starts to feel normal. It starts to feel like this is just how relationships work. But it's not. That's not love. That's not connection. That's survival. That's management. That's waking up every day wondering what version of them you're going to get and adjusting yourself just to get through it. And you don't even realize how much of your life you've built around avoiding their next eruption or proving your worth or chasing that fleeting moment of validation they dangle in front of you just enough to keep you hoping. They don't feed your self-esteem. They feed on it. And eventually you start confusing their occasional praise with love. You start thinking that maybe if you could just say, it better do more, be less sensitive, you'd finally get the peace you deserve, but you won't, not with them. Because peace doesn't come from earning someone else's respect. It comes from respecting yourself enough to stop performing. So that's where your focus needs to shift off of them, back to you. You stop asking, why are they like this? And start asking, why am I tolerating it? You stop wondering how to get them to change and start asking how you can change what you accept. You stop trying to fix something that was never built on mutual care, and you start rebuilding the relationship you have with yourself. That's where your power lives. Start small. Start with the way you talk to yourself. If you wouldn't let a friend speak to you the way this person does, why do you accept it in your own mind, that critical voice that echoes every insult you've heard from them? Interrupt it, challenge it, replace it with truth, and not the performative kind, not the I'm fine mask you wear to survive. I mean the real kind. The kind that says, I am allowed to take up space. I am allowed to feel what I feel. I don't have to be perfect to be worthy. And don't just stop at your thoughts. Look at your habits. Where's your energy going? Who are you bending for? What are you saying yes to out of fear or obligation? Self-respect shows up in the small choices. 2, how you use your time, who gets access to you, how you respond when someone tests your line. Because the more you shift your attention away from managing someone else's emotions and toward honoring your own, the more you remember who you are, the more you realize you were never the problem. You were just the one willing to carry it all. And look, this isn't a magical switch. It doesn't happen in a single moment. But the more you choose yourself genuinely, not out of anger, not out of spite, but out of care, the The more you stop needing validation from someone who never had the capacity to give it to begin with. They don't get to define your worth. That's your job now. So the question isn't, how do I get them to treat me better? The question is, how can I treat myself like I already know I deserve better? Because once you start doing that, once your decisions are rooted in self-respect, everything shifts. You stop negotiating with dysfunction. You stop explaining your boundaries. You stop accepting crumbs and calling it a meal. You stop asking for peace and you start creating it. Let's bring it all together. You've spent enough time shrinking yourself to make room for someone else's ego, enough time second guessing your words, managing their moods, and walking on eggshells just to keep the peace. That's not connection, that's survival. And you're not here to survive people. You're here to stand in who you are. So no, you don't need to be nicer to a narcissist. You need to be as clearer. You need to be as calmer. You need to be as stronger in your boundary and softer toward yourself. You stop reacting. You stop explaining. You stop proving, and you start reclaiming your voice. Because at the end of the day, this isn't about them. It's about you. It's about protecting your peace without apology. It's about choosing clarity over chaos. And most of all, it's about remembering that the strongest thing you can do is stop asking for respect and start giving it to yourself first.